The Nintendo Switch in 2024. Nintendo really have not outlined their plans for much of anything this year. Is Nintendo going to suffer? Is Nintendo doomed? No. Alright. I should probably explain a little bit more why I don't think Nintendo are screwed. I mean, after all, that's probably why you guys clicked on the video, to hear my thoughts on the matter. Now, firstly, I actually want to quickly shout out Captain Alex Designs for these awesome custom Joy-Cons. Check out his page and stuff in the description down below. I figured I'd plug him really quickly since, you know, I picked up my Switch for the beginning part of this video, and it's got the Wario and Waluigi Joy-Cons. Just figured I'd plug that real quick. But nevertheless, a big point of conversation that many people are talking about right now is the state of Nintendo in 2024, because, as we know, the rumor mill's been really kicking around in terms of, like, Nintendo Directs and the Switch 2, and honestly, here's the thing, right? I usually try to stay out of this conversation, because I don't have much to contribute. I mean, as we've clearly seen, credible leakers and credible people in the industry will say, hey, there's a Direct coming to this month, or the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be announced this month. And a lot of times it ends up not happening. So that's why I've always said from the very beginning, don't put all of your cards on these leakers and insiders or whatever else, because even if they are 100% credible, a lot of times they could be wrong, and it could just be for the simple fact of something gets delayed, something gets pushed, and honestly, we have to keep a lot of that stuff in mind when we're having these conversations about Nintendo Directs and all these rumors. Like, we have to keep that in mind. But that's not really what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is a lot of people saying that what Nintendo are doing this year is going to be a critical error and could be a giant mistake for them. And this is more specifically about two things. A, the Switch 2 most likely not being released this year, again according to rumors, and also because of the fact that we don't really know what's coming out for them this year. Now, here's the thing. I usually try to be an optimistic, positive person on the channel, because for those of you who've been around for a while, you know that I used to be, and still can be, very critical about what Nintendo does. That's what I have to say as a Nintendo fan, right? Nintendo fans aren't there to fanboy and to overly gush about how great Nintendo are. Real Nintendo fans will do that, but they'll also be critical when Nintendo makes mistakes, whenever Nintendo messes up. So that's where I'm trying to look at this. I'm trying to frame this whole video in a way that's constructive, you know, that criticizes Nintendo for what needs to be criticized, but also not being the doomsday type that you see on, like, Twitter or whatever, that are like, oh my god, Nintendo is so doomed because the Switch 2 isn't coming out this year. Let's take a step back. Let's talk about this and go from there. So, if you guys enjoy this video, definitely like, comment, and subscribe, all that stuff down below. And do comment what you think of this matter, because I know a lot of people have a lot of differing opinions, so I would like to hear what a lot of people have to say. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with Nintendo's 2024 lineup, because I feel like that's a really big conversation piece, especially if there isn't going to be a Switch 2 until next year. Obviously, we only know the next 3 titles. We know Endless Ocean, we know Paper Mario, and we know Luigi's Mansion 2. Now, 2 of those 3 games are re-releases, whether they be a remaster or a remake, whichever. So that means that there's only one new game coming out, being Endless Ocean. And that game is coming out in about less than a month. And then Paper Mario is coming out also in less than a month. So that only leaves one game beyond the next month, being, of course, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. Now, I do want to point out something that I feel like not a lot of people have taken into consideration. Of course, this does not mean Nintendo will do the same thing this year, but I want to bring up last year as well. Talking about 2023 and reflecting on it, we knew a lot of what was going to happen in the first half of the year, and absolutely no clue what was going to happen in the second half of the year until E3 time, aka June. Even though there's not E3 anymore, I'm still going to call it E3 time, just for simplicity's sake. So at around E3 time in June, Nintendo announced WarioWare Move It. They announced Super Mario Bros. Wonder. They announced Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. They announced Princess Peach Showtime. They announced a bunch of games that would be coming out later that year. So I feel like even though at that time, before the June Direct, we did not know much about what was in Nintendo's second half of the year, we learned then. Heck, I even think Super Mario RPG was announced in that June Direct as well. So there's a lot that we did not know about the second half of the year. In fact, we basically knew nothing until that June Direct. So this year could honestly be very much of the same. They're holding their cards close to their chest until they're ready to show us what's going to be in the second half of that year. Because honestly, I feel like that Nintendo Direct last year, where we got Super Mario RPG, where we got Luigi's Mansion 2, where we got Princess Peach Showtime, when we got Super Mario Bros. Wonder, I feel like that Direct was just elevated in terms of its quality and how people received it because of the fact that all these games were coming out really soon and none of them were known about. So I feel like if Nintendo go for that approach this year, where the second half of the year is all outlined in June or July, I feel like, honestly, that's not a bad thing. Give the focus right now to Paper Mario, Endless Ocean, and Luigi's Mansion, so that for the second half of the year, you can focus on whatever you're going to do then. I feel like that is completely possible for Nintendo, and I don't want people to really dwell on the fact that nothing is coming out after Luigi's Mansion 2, because obviously Nintendo are going to release titles. They're not just going to be like, oh, the second half of the year we got absolutely nothing. They're not gonna do that. Like, I feel like people are doomsdaying this unnecessarily. Now, the expectation I think people should have for the second half of this year is there's not gonna be many new titles. Most of them are going to be remasters, ports, or remakes, simply because of the fact that that's in the stage of the Switch we are right now. Most first-party and even third-party developers are already working on whatever's next. You're not going to get a new 3D Mario game. You're not going to get a new Mario Kart. You're not going to get a Legend of Zelda. You know, the only new game that I would say maybe expect would be Metroid Prime 4, because that was already previously announced for the Nintendo Switch. So that's the only new game I'd say you could really go into this expecting. Or potentially maybe something smaller, like a Mario Baseball or a Star Fox, something that isn't like one of Nintendo's big heavy hitters. So don't expect anything major coming up. Heck, I'd even say don't even expect anything major announced at all. This is where Nintendo could come in with like a Metroid Prime 2 HD, or a Wind Waker HD, or Twilight Princess HD ports. That's where all of that is kind of possible, and honestly, that's probably what you should expect. Maybe not those games specifically, but just them bringing back more. Because I know a lot of people were complaining that a lot of this year has been remasters and remakes. You know, with Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Paper Mario, Luigi's Mansion 2. All of this is stuff that already exists, and people are like, we want new things. Well, the Switch is over 7 years old now. The amount of new they can do with it is not possible. There's not much they could really do that's new. So if you want newer titles, you're just gonna have to wait for the Switch 2. Speaking of the Switch 2, let's talk about that now. Let's talk about the Switch 2 not coming out this year, and if it's all doom and gloom for Nintendo. Here's the thing I feel like is going to be tricky for Nintendo with the Switch 2. The longer they wait for it to release, the more underpowered it's going to seem, right? Because here's the thing, right? We already got things like the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, all these really powerful handheld gaming PCs that can do really well, that can have really good performance, that look really nice and have a lot of power to them, you know. And granted, Nintendo is kind of going to the beat of their own drum. They're not necessarily competing with these companies, and I get that, but that does impact still if people are going to buy the Nintendo Switch 2 or not. If it's just a Switch with a little more power but not as good as the Steam Deck, why would people buy the Switch 2 over a Steam Deck, right? I mean, there's Nintendo's first-party lineup, but that's assuming that whoever's getting it is a fan of Nintendo's first-party lineup. You're not getting that casual crowd. Well, you might get the casual crowd if you get a lot of the casual games in there, but then that'll make Nintendo fans angry because A lot of Nintendo fans don't really love all the casual things. When you go into a Nintendo Direct, right? You don't want to see the casual farming sims or, just the very casual, crowdy kind of games, the party, carnival games, or sports games. You don't want to see those, right? You want to see the heavy Nintendo titles. So Nintendo have to strike a balance with the Switch 2, where it's like, if it's not going to be as powerful as the Steam Deck or any other handheld gaming PCs, they need to do something to still differentiate it from the rest. Which, is really freaking hard. Because that's why the Switch sold so well to begin with. Because yes, it has the casual games and all that stuff, but it introduced the concept of hybrid gaming, of TV and handheld play all in one device. And it really spearheaded that movement. So I really have a hard time seeing how Nintendo could be successful with a device that does the same thing as the general Switch, but doesn't do anything to make it better. And I think the main thing to make it better is by making it more powerful. Because obviously power isn't everything. But what the power does is it allows third parties to do more on your platform. And I feel like if Nintendo not only have a strong lineup of first parties, but also get the third parties on board, that's where you can have more of a competition with things like the Steam Deck, like I said. Because the Steam Deck, you can play all of your third-party titles basically on that thing, So it's like, okay, so then you're just relying on the first-party lineup. But if the Nintendo Switch 2 can compete to the same level as the Steam Deck, well then, you have third-party games that can run on both devices at the same performance, but the Nintendo Switch 2 has the edge of also having that first-party lineup. So, you see, it's weird because it's kind of making the Steam Deck and the Nintendo Switch competitors, even though they're kind of in their own different worlds, but you have to understand that these two devices are very much similar, very much the same in a lot of ways. Heck, I've been playing my Steam Deck a bunch recently, more than my Nintendo Switch, because honestly, I've kind of replaced my Nintendo Switch with it. I took it on the plane for the first time, and took it on my trip, and did not bring my Switch. So, Nintendo's going to need to do a lot to impress people that, might not buy into it, because at the end of the day, yes, Nintendo wants the hardcore Nintendo audience to come over, but they also want the casual crowd over too, because if they don't get that casual crowd, then the Nintendo Switch 2 is just naturally probably going to sell half the amount of the original Switch does, and Nintendo does not want that. So going back to the original topic of conversation, the delaying of the Nintendo Switch 2 to next year, the more they delay it, unless they're actively doing stuff to keep it up to date, it's just going to be more outdated the longer you wait. Tech that comes out this year, when you compare it to next year, already seems outdated, right? In a lot of ways. So, I really hope that Nintendo can find a way to really make this console shine. Because if they don't, I'm not saying it'll sell as bad as the Wii U. I'm not saying it'll be anywhere near that bad. But it will not have the same success as the Nintendo Switch 1 if they don't do anything to differentiate it and to make it really stand on its own. Personally, I feel like regardless, I think the Switch 2 will sell less than the original Switch. I feel like that's kind of obvious. But how much less it sells completely depends on what Nintendo does and how they go about doing things. I hope this video made sense. I realize I've been kind of rambling a lot. It's less of a cohesive, structured video and more of just kind of me spitting off bullet points. So hopefully it was something you guys enjoyed. Like I said in last week's video, these next few videos for the next few weeks are going to kind of be just kind of like less organized, less structured videos because I'm working on bigger projects. So hopefully you enjoyed this discussion. It was kind of a interesting discussion because it was less about positivity and excitement about Nintendo and more about looking at things critically. And I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. So thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Really hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, and subscribe. All that stuff down below. Hit that notification bell so you're notified of when I upload videos. And until next time, you guys, I will see you all in the next video.